Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about you, me, and typology stuff and just give an update on how I'm thinking about things. I think I got things to a much simpler place than I had it before. The last video I did about this was just, everything was just super abstract. The way I was talking about feeling and thinking, everything was just super abstract, and I realized that like I had lost the plot a little bit, and that I need to get these concepts to back to very graspable things. Yeah, so extroversion, can I flip this? No. Extroversion. Extroversion is a movement towards multiplicity, like I've been saying. It's like this. That's extroversion. This is an object. You have an object, this circle thing, and then extroversion moves from the object towards other objects that have not been integrated, that are not experienced as a unity already. So, like, for example, you're a troglodyte, and you go out and you discover treasure in a different cave from your own home. And you think, oh, there must be more treasure in this cave then. So you continue to explore on in the cave because you found treasure. That's like that's a very like perceptual example, but yeah, that's how I think about extroversion now. That's the movement of multiplicity. It's not towards the parts. That's sensation. It's towards other objects. Introversion is it's still a movement towards unity, but it's not internal to the object that's being experienced. It's more of a way of like constraining that new object. Constraining is a really, really helpful word that I've started using for introversion. So the introvert experience, like, it finds the treasure, and it's like, oh, great, I'm gonna bring this back to my house, I'm gonna bring this back to my cave, and I'm gonna put it next to all my other stuff, and we're gonna organize the cave, and we're gonna see how this changes things in the cave, because I have this new treasure. So it's like, this is the object, and then these are sort of like past experiences. This is your cave. This is the object being brought into the cave, and constraining the new thing. I really feel like that's much truer. Talking about it like that is much truer to the phenomenology as described by introverted perceiving types. So I'm much happier about that. Those are still pretty perceptual heavy examples, but I think they still work for feeling and thinking. This right here, this is intuition and sensation. It's very basic. You got your attributes, you got your parts. Sensation associates them into unity. Very simple. I know that seems like everybody's talked about that. The important thing there, I think, is that everything that you experience is like that. There's not an object that you experience that isn't intuitively like bound. Like, I think we perceive through intuition and sensation. It's not like, okay, there's nothing in the parts of a chair that make a chair. The chairness is not in the legs, it's not in the handles, it's not in the wood. It's in this magical intuitive jump into unity. And I think that, so every time you experience anything as a unity, that is the movement of intuition. And what I really like about this, talking about it like this, is that it really nails down intuition as a perception function. It's not, because intuition is not a deliberate act. It's not like, oh, I'm like thinking about things and I'm associating things and things are kind of like this. It's like, no. Intuition experience is like, oh, it's this unity right here. It's the same kind of vividness that you experience a table as one. That's the vividness that intuition has. So intuition, it's the perception of the structure, the structural unity. You could say the form, as long as you don't kind of gut off into Platonic idealism. It's the thing that gives the unity to the object. And then sensation, of course, is attention to the parts of that. And then that works fractally. Like, you have a subject like American politics, sort of the things which give unity to that subject. That's where intuition is going to go, and the facts of that subject will be where sensation tends to go. Thinking and feeling, super easy way of thinking about this is that same Russian example I gave, where there's this Soviet IQ test that they give to peasants, and they're like, okay, we have a bucket, an axe, a bird, and a barn. What doesn't belong? And what they're supposed to say is that the bird doesn't belong, but the Russian peasants just can't do it. My argument is that the Soviets wanted them to be in a thinking mode when the peasants were just naturally in a feeling mode. The reason they couldn't do it is that they would make up a story about these things. They would be like, okay, well, you use the bucket to carry water to the barn, and you can use the axe at the barn to make a nest for the bird, and then you're feeding the bird or you're giving the bird water, and you've given him shelter, and they make this harmonious life out of the classes, the objects that the Soviets gave them. And so you can what I want to argue is that thinking is a movement toward a rigid order. So you could think of it like a crystal, like the way you draw a crystal, and like it's got this linear structure throughout all of it. This vertex is connected to this vertex is connected to this vertex is connected to this vertex. It's like all of the things in it are connected to everything else by one line. But feeling, and so, okay, you can understand how that applies to what we just talked about. If you think of inanimate as the class that the Russians wanted them to be thinking about, it's like inanimate applies to bucket in this way. Check. It's inanimate. It applies to the axe in this way. Check. Okay, it's in. It applies to the bird. It's out. It applies to the barn. It's in. And so it's this very rigid, orderly thing. But feeling, on the other hand, it's more like music. It's something that's much more fluid. It's adding one note to a harmony changes the whole harmony. There's like this emergent thing that comes out of the parts coming together. It becomes this new vibe, if you will. And so the Russians were so into the vibe of just living that they automatically assumed that that they were supposed to interact with these options on the test like that. Okay, they're asking me to create an order out of this, and it's a living order where harmony abounds. And so I can't exclude anything. Like maybe if you told me that a murder was going to come in here, I would be like, okay, that's going to mess up the harmony of what's going on here. Like, I don't want him playing his sharp, flat note, whatever. That's going to mess up the harmony. But I'm kind of going off on a thing, but you can understand it's more of this. It's more of this. All of this stuff is participating in this one singular vibe. Wow. Yeah, I feel like I'm talking really fast. Michael just made a new video too. Michael Pierce. I think talking about the perception functions. I wanted to do a little response to that, based on what I've just been talking about. I really like what he said about extroverted intuition and this matrix idea, where the relationships between objects, that's the real meat and potatoes kind of for extroverted intuition. And I think that's like bang on, like that's totally right. He kind of tends towards NTP-ness. He presents a more of a extroverted intuition with introverted thinking there, by saying that like the objects themselves don't really matter. And I think that's that's wrong for extroverted intuition generally. But it is really demonstrative of how introversion works as a constraint on extroversion. So for the ENTP, right, you got this circle here, and the form is of what's of interest, and so it's the form moving out towards other objects. So it's like, okay, what else shares in this form? That's the constraint of introverted thinking. Introverted thinking comes in and it says like, okay, if you're going to associate this form with something else, we're going to order that. We're going to put that in order where they're going to share in some idea, and that idea is going to rule each of them in this linear way. Like it's going to have a yes to both of them. They're both going to share in that in one sense, but then the attributes of that, we're not going to pay attention to that. We're not going to pay attention to what is not being ruled, and so that's going to kind of repress the particularities of the objects that we're talking about. And so yeah, that's how you could kind of see, like, this is how analogies are, right? It's I associate something with something else, and then there's a common idea which like becomes illuminated through this association. That's NTP cognition in a nutshell. It's where the undergirding structure of reality is what's really real to the NTP. As far as I understand, the ENFP is also kind of, it's associating the form with other forms, but the constraint is more like, what is the music that's going to be created by doing that? And so like the ENFP is like you watch Robin Williams do something with like a towel. He's like, oh, this towel, it's a burqa. It'll do something funny with the burqa, and then I'll turn the towel into like a matador cape, and so it's like it's associating it with something else, but there's no common idea that's ruling that. The common idea is just that these things kind of like create a music and have they shift the tone in whatever way, and that's why ENFPs are like so random. It's like unconstrained association for effect, for whatever effect that they want, for whatever vibe that they're looking for, and that's why they're so funny as well. It's also, I think, why like NTPs I associate much more with physics. Like, what is the undergirding equation that rules everything here? And ENFPs, I always associate ENFPs with like biology, but especially with chemistry. It's like, okay, what if I add like sodium to this equation? Like, what if we combine these two forms and get something that's actually completely new? Like, that's the real difference between, I think that's what it is. It's like you associate two things, but you don't get one thing underneath that. You get a third thing. Like this third thing appears, and it's the shared harmony between them. And it's not reducible to their interaction in a matrix. It's a completely new thing. And I've always thought this about ENFPs. Like, I've always experienced that as a difference between myself and ENFPs, is that they always intuitively knew that things could not be reduced to their to their parts and to the relationships between their parts. That there was a new thing that was created when you combined two things. Yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts right now. Sorry I talked so fast. I hope that makes sense. This was just kind of like, I was excited and I needed to get this out. Yeah.